You know, we got to come up with lyrics for that tune.
We got to come up with something.
Something's got to. What we really need is a new tune. Ace, what's
Mark.
up?
Well, here we are, week number 2.
Oh my gosh, what's been going on?
What a crazy week, right? First of all, I'm going to correct an error that a lot of people have called me on from the first episode. Complete accidental oversight. This is Mark. He is my friend. He's the producer of this show. He's my co-host, and we've been friends for a long time, and we thought that this would be fun. So that's Mark.
Well, thank you, and it's good to be around.
Yeah.
We love talking about music.
We do. We often did it before the podcast, so we thought it would be kind of fun to join in with all of you. And to that end, I first of all want to thank everybody who sent the wonderful feedback on the last week's show. And we've set up some social media stuff now, specifically an email address. So if you have any feedback on the show, if you have any ideas for things you want covered, anything like that, it's acetalksmusic@gmail.com. Write to us, and we'll see what comes out of it. So
Ace Talks Music.
Ace Talks Music.
And that's what we're here to do today. So we should mention, when we set up a lot of stuff after the last show.
We did. Yeah, we're all over the place. We have Instagram and Twitters, and also, you know, we had some really great response to the first podcast. Just make sure you subscribe to it, whether it's through Apple Podcasts or Amazon or YouTube or whatever you decide to watch it on. But I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this.
I think so. One of the great things about this format, even though it's an audio format, almost in a radio show way, the bottom line is we're recording video in all these. And so as we're COVID safe, we can still be able to show video. We can have guests that are playing some tunes. I mean, we the sky's the limit on this thing.
Yeah, we are going to have guests in the future. I had a lot of my friends in the business contact me over the week, having listened to it and literally volunteering their services. They just want to be a part of it, so that's cool.
Well, it's good. Yeah, it's cool. And with the soundstage we have over here, we'll be able to, basically at our budget, we'll be able to do whatever we want to do. So
yeah, there you go.
It's very nice. What else we have going on?
Well, since the first podcast, we lost one of the giants in the hard rock heavy metal community. A lot of people don't realize just how much impact a producer can have on an artist and an album. And when you have a guy like Martin Birch, who literally has been at the helm of some of the most influential and impactful albums from some of the biggest bands in the world. We're talking about a guy who started his career working with the likes of Fleetwood Mac and Jeff Beck and things like that, and then goes to work with Deep Purple, hitting a couple of their biggest records. And then he starts working with Rainbow, doing their 2 biggest records. And then he started a very long jaunt with Iron Maiden, about 11 years, if I'm not mistaken. And he did some of their biggest records, including Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, Somewhere in Time, things like that. And then he started working with Whitesnake. But the first time he ever really hit my radar was with the newly reformed Black Sabbath, after Ozzy had been, unceremoniously removed. And the story that I've been told is that Tony Iommi from Sabbath was in the Rainbow, and he met Ronnie James Dio, who he knew from the Rainbow days. And they started chatting, and they said, why don't we get together and write some songs and see what happens? And that afternoon, Ronnie went over to Tony's place, and the first song I think they did was Children of the Grave, which was one of the best songs on that first reunited Sabbath album, the Heaven and Hell album. Subsequently, when they reformed as a band a little while ago, they actually took that name as their name. They didn't want to call it Black Sabbath because, obviously that was a going concern with Ozzy again. But with Ronnie back at the helm, they just called the band Heaven and Hell. And if you didn't get to see one of those shows, you missed out. They were spectacular. But like I said, his influence on those bands was monumental. And when I think about my personal experience with artists and the producers who have worked with them, it's transformative. A couple of years ago, one of the bands I look after, Uriah Heep, we decided to use a producer named Jay Rustin, a fellow Canadian actually, but Jay had previously worked with bands like Steel Panther. He'd done albums with Stone Sour. He'd also worked on a couple of Black Star Riders albums before this. And the guys in Heap tell me that the recording sessions with Jay were the best they'd had in decades. He was so casual, and but also would know how to get them the best out of each of them, and it allowed them to really. And he also does it a little bit different. You know, a lot of people don't realize that when you're recording a record, there are basically two ways you can do it. One way is where you record each instrument and each element separately. You know, because you've been in the studio many times.
Right.
And then the other one is the more live kind of thing. So traditionally, like a drummer usually comes in first, records for 2 or 3 days, laying down all the drum tracks. Then the other things get layered on top. So it's actually possible for the band to never be in the room together when they're making a record because they're each doing their own parts. Jay doesn't believe in that. Jay wants the bands together. He wants them to play, and he also doesn't want to do little bits of each song. He wants, at the end of the day, he wants a song done, all of the elements. And that was a very different way of doing things for Heap, but it resulted in probably their best album in a couple of decades. I mean, both from the critics and from the fans' feedback. So you know, and then producers in general, they're like another member of the band. I don't think a lot of fans really realize just how much impact they really have on the songs. Now, I know you spent some time in the studio. Did you ever experience anything like that you can mention?
Well, I mean, we some of the big stuff that I was able to witness was very much separated into pieces, especially for some of the best vocalists,
Hmm.
where you would take a vocal track and even though it came from the best voice in the business, the Whitney Houstons of the world, I had the opportunity to witness. You could break that into syllables and find the absolute best. So you were taking the best to the best, and then you were breaking it into pieces and making it even more perfect, which in a way is very pristine and sterile. And I think that's the kind of a thing you're talking about, where you can break away from that, where you can find the imperfections, the natural timing and the synchronicity of the band and the motion, how it kind of can come together when they're all in the room.
Yeah, and it's also, there's also an emotional detachment that the producers bring to the song because, you know, an artist when he writes a song, it's like his baby, and he has a vision in his head of what it's going to be like, and the producer may hear it and say, I have a different idea for this. It's going to make it very good. I'll give you a prime example. On the Kiss album Destroyer, Bob Ezrin, the famous Bob Ezrin who'd done, you know, Pink Floyd and all kinds of bands. Paul, the kind of rule in Kiss at the time was that you write the song, you get to sing it. And Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons being the two prolific songwriters in that band, so that's why they sing most of
Mm-hmm.
the stuff. But one day during the sessions for the Destroyer album, Paul comes in with this kind of light poppy song called "God of Thunder," and it was
Oh yes.
all about, you know, I'm your God of Thunder, I'm your
Mm-hmm.
rock and roll. And Ezrin listened to it and he said, you know what? I think Gene's got to sing this one.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul was like, no, 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 it's my song. I'm singing it. He says no. And on top of that, I wanna slow it down. I wanna make it down and dirty and grungy and really like, you know, instead of God of Thunder, it was like God of Thunder. You know, so and you know those changes, they accepted his criticism and they went in ahead and did it that way. And it's become one of the biggest hit classic songs in of the Kiss catalog. All because Ezrin could see the vision of taking that song where it should go rather than where the artist saw it. So
Well, that's right. And that's the added value of the producer. Is theoretically an album is a collection of the best minds and the best creative approach. And you know, it's funny. I was yelled at by a producer once, and it's important for me to
so
comment and
why?
say I'm nothing compared to these pieces, these talented, amazing people. But I do remember one of my first recording projects, and I brought my best skills to it, and and so did everybody else. And I remember the first day that that album was actually mastered and listened to it, and I could barely hear my guitar. And I do remember the producer coming back and saying, it's better that it's not about you. It was about the song and the material.
Hmm.
And if you could get your ego out of this thing, you'd realize that we made something better because it was the collective of minds and of talent. And it's hard. Some artists, they don't have to give it up. They're in a position of power and authority, and because of their talent and their role, and they don't have to give it up. And in some cases, it's not never hurt because they're so good. But in other cases, maybe it's damaged because that collaboration doesn't exist. But when it does, it's better.
Exactly, and that's why it's important to take note of people like Martin Birch. I mean, without him, I don't really think those albums would have been as impactful as they ended up being. So, rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Did he have a sound? Well, what did he bring to the table that was?
Well, his big thing was that he really embraced the technology of the time and all that, and he became really adept at capturing the band's live sound onto vinyl, which was something that was a very difficult thing for a lot of other producers to represent. And as a result of that, when you have a band as exciting as, say, Iron Maiden or Rainbow, who are incredible titans on the stage, reproducing that energy in the studio is not an easy thing. So he did it. He would consistently do it. So
Right. Well, here's to Martin. You know, a tribute to one of the greats.
indeed. Now, one of the next thing I thought that struck me when I was reading his CV, as it were, all the albums he'd worked on, is there was an album that had tremendous impact on me as a young man, and it was the soundtrack to a movie, and that movie was an animated film that came out in 1981 called Heavy Metal.
Heavy metal.
Heavy metal. When I was a teenager growing up in Canada, heavy metal came out as a magazine. It was something we hadn't seen before. I was a big comic book geek, but suddenly here was a magazine that was targeted at adults, but with illustrations in it, where some of the best science fiction and fantasy stories of the time were being illustrated, and it was because it was written for adults. There was nudity, there was adult themes, there was language and all that sort of thing. But it really had an impact on me. And when I heard that the movie was coming out, it was a big deal. But the bigger thing of the movie that impacted me in ways that are still reverberating in my life today is the soundtrack. Irving Azoff, one of the big producers in the metal world, or in the world period. I mean, he manages the Eagles and Christina Aguilera and Van Halen and bands like this. He worked with some. It was done up in Canada, so that's why almost all the voice talent in the film is Canadians, like John Candy and all these people. But he helped them with the music, getting the music together, and it was so many of the bands that. And some of the classic tracks that went out. I mean, Cheap Trick was on there, Blue Oyster Cult, Black Sabbath, Don Felder from the Eagles. It's an incredible soundtrack that has literally every song has had a major impact on me. And one of the songs that's on that soundtrack and one of the pivotal scenes in the film is "The Mob Rules" from Black Sabbath, which Martin produced. And so last week, the heavy metal movie. It celebrated its 39th birthday, and there's a bit of a resurgence in it at the moment. There's even a pinball machine coming out on it in very shortly here. But I'm very excited by the fact that next year will be the 40th, and I just want to see if they do something special to celebrate that. So.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. When I grew up, I was 11 years old at the time heavy metal came out.
Well, let's see, 81.
So that makes me 50. But it also meant that I had access to a magazine with nudity.
Exactly.
At the age of 11, that was,
my parents would never figure that out, right?
So I became an avid reader myself, or an avid looker, I should say.
An avid looker. There you go. So, yeah, heavy metal. The first song that impacted me was Veteran of the Psychic Wars from Blue Oyster Cult. That led me on exploring their whole catalog. I mean, it caused me to check out Cheap Trick. It caused me to check out so many of the artists on there. And I think the biggest testament to the album is that here I am 31 or 39 years later of listening to that. And I think in my lifetime I probably owned 5 or 6 copies of the soundtrack in various formats. But I still listen to it on a regular basis just because I really love that collection of songs. So, heavy metal.
Heavy metal. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. So, um, you mentioned at the top of the show that we are in a COVID world and all of that sort of thing. And so something happened in this past week that I thought would be worth talking about. And that is, as you well know, every year in South Dakota, they have this massive motorcycle rally called Sturgis. I think something like 250,000 people attend this thing. It goes for like 10 days. There's bands that play every day of the thing. And I had a look at who was. I was a little surprised at first to learn that they were actually going ahead with the whole thing, but they did, and there was a lot of bands who I know who were on the bill. And the thing is that I was listening to Eddie Trunk's show this morning, and he said that he was talking to a member of one of the bands that was on the stage and basically saying that nobody was wearing masks or social distancing or whatever, which makes Sturgis, by definition, what the CDC, refers to as a super spreader event. And I mean, I don't wish this COVID on anybody. I mean, I haven't personally had it, but I have some very close friends who have gone through it, and man, oh man, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. So I don't really know. This is one of the most frustrating things for me during this pandemic is that my industry, the music industry, was the first to shut down and is going to be the last to reopen.
Right.
And I just feel like I'm not here to debate COVID-19, whether or not it's real, whether or not wearing masks works or anything like that. The bottom line is, this is where we're at in the world right now. You can't deny that all of these people aren't getting sick from it and dying. So this kind of activity is underlying the challenges that we have moving forward with doing live shows. I mean, I don't know if we're going to be able to do live shows as soon as people think.
Yeah. Well, it's what's interesting is if this is a problem, if this becomes a problem, and I have been rather conservatively behaving in my view. I mean, we're not using microphones today because we're each one of us has our own headset, because if there's a risk, we want to make sure it's minimal.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a risk that this is a spreading event, then this will set music back. It'll set the opening date back, and these bands won't be able to get back in the venues, and it's rather heartbreaking.
And and the challenges are even more than just live. I mean, another challenge that's faced us a few times is that in today's world, many bands have the members of the bands who live in different parts of the world. And it never was a problem pre-COVID because, when we're going to start a tour, we start a record or whatever, everybody just flies to one central location and off we go. But now, that's not as easy a proposition as it sounds. You have to do a 14-day isolation after you arrive someplace. And then, do you go into a studio with your bandmates and who knows what they've been doing with their lives? And you're in a confined space for however long. There's major risks involved. But is it really that hard to wear a mask?
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's tough. I mean, we try to social distance here, and we take the mask off. We're also not really out in the world. It's not like we're going to these events we think are super spreader events.
No.
And so in that particular sense, we're doing the very best we can. We're not sharing microphones and all that. It is hard to wear a mask. I mean, it sucks. But the idea that if that disease was there, and if it spreads, that it may very well stop. It may well hurt a lot more people than were there, of course,
Mm.
and it will set music back because we won't be able to get those concert venues open. It'll set sports back. It'll set everything back because so many more people will have been exposed.
Now, I did see, I had several people send me a photograph this week of one of the first, well, what they call truly social distancing shows that happened in the last week. I'm not sure what artist, I think it was a country artist that did it, but the photo was quite interesting because they had basically set up these little, how would you describe it? These little platforms that had gates around them and had about 5 seats in each one. And each of these little structures was about 10 feet from the others, and there was
Hmm.
row after row of them. And so you could, your little group of people could sit in one of them, and then you'd be safely distanced from the other people. And because of the way the structure was made, it wasn't very easy for you to get out of that thing and wander around or anything like that. So I mean, I applaud those people because I think out of any of the solutions I've seen presented so far, that one seems to be the one closest to maybe being able to work. The only problem there, of course, is again, we're back to the economics of scale. Physically, you're putting 5 people in the space that you normally could have put probably 20.
Right.
And so you're losing all of that additional revenue in ticket sales and in beer sales and in food and merchandise, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yes, although the cost per ticket is magically going up, and maybe they'll pick some of that back up. But
they'll have to,
you
yeah.
know, one of the interesting things about it is that little box a year ago would have been treated as special. It would have been a luxury location sold only to corporations.
That's true.
And now it's available to anybody. Anybody who wants that little box can take that little box.
We're all special.
You're all special now.
So yeah. Well, I don't want to get down about this. I mean, it's very easy to, but I mean, I commend everybody who's trying to figure out a way for us to go forward. But realistically, I still think that the key is going to be when we finally have a vaccine. So
Yes. So our fingers will remain crossed for as long as that takes. You know, the drive-in thing. Now I know it has not translated well to music yet, but it is taking off in terms of the movies,
yeah.
and people are getting used to it. I just read. Now we go to a drive-in every week. I have a relationship with the Rhodium Theater, which has been around for God. It's on the other side of 50 years, so it's probably over 80 at this point. And they show a movie every weekend, and they had started to do this before COVID,
Hmm.
and they after many years of taking a break. But because of my relationship, we get to go every week, and so it's our week. It's one of our weekend activities, and we go and we sit in the very back row in our van, and we cook up some of our own popcorn, so we save a little bit more money that way. And it's fantastic. And they sell out every single week, and people are getting used to this. And I just read that Sony Studios, their lot, is going to open up, and they're going to start showing major movies every single week.
Well, and then you add to that, you've heard about Walmart.
Walmart.
Walmart has 200 of their locations across the states offering their parking lots as drive-in theaters, and the movies are free. You just go there. Now, I'm curious. I haven't been to one of these drive-ins. I have been to the Rhodium before COVID, and I loved it. You know, we went and saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and we brought a barbecue and everything, and it was kind of like tailgating. It was fun. But tell me a little more about the actual experience during the COVID. Now, since you've been there since the virus has hit, how does it work? Like, how far apart are the cars? What do they do about concessions? What about if you have to go to the bathroom? How does that all work?
Right. So, you know, in a lot of ways, the goal is you keep people in the car and you stop them from mingling. In the case of the Rhodium, we actually ran a bunch of the events. We did 6 graduation ceremonies at the Rhodium, where every kid's family from the school. That's right. That's right. Yeah, the audience is craving something that's good, and we're all craving something that's good.
Hmm.
And we're pretty flexible. You know, we're waiting for it. We're waiting for someone to give it to us in a way that's interesting and fun. And you know, we here in the studio, we embrace 360 technology and VR and 3D and things like that. And And there have been some amazing projects. I go back and look at the Eminem interview where they drove around with Eminem. And yeah, it's Detroit, and he gets to talk about where he grew up and how he lived and what he remembers. And you get to sit in the back of the car with Eminem and have him talk to you, because it's not just in VR 360, it's in 3D.
Hmm.
And so you are looking at somebody when you're wearing the goggles that makes it look like you're actually sitting next to them. And it gives you a connection and an experience in a world where we are becoming more connected. Passenger, Ben Folds, I sat in the beginning of COVID and watched their live performances. And for the first time, and I had the opportunity to meet Ben a couple of times years ago. A Passenger I adore his music. And for the first time, I felt like I was tuning into a Friends channel. It wasn't just some guy on a stage. It was somebody who I felt like I was getting to know. And that relationship, the strength of that relationship, I think will make their ability to convey their music to me easier. It'll make me a better consumer of their product.
Well, the whole 360 thing, I'm loving it. I mean, I've seen some stuff done with this technology that just blew my mind. Having been an artist manager for as long as I have, I've seen shows from almost every aspect of the building, whether it be on the side of the stage, from the balconies, from the sound booth, wherever. But the one place that I've never, for obvious reasons, been is on stage with the band when they're performing, and that whole experience eludes anybody who isn't actually part of a band. But we had one of our artists, Stiff Little Fingers. They do a big show in Belfast, Ireland every year, which is their hometown. And on the last time we did one, we put a 360 camera in front of the drum kit and recorded some of the songs and posted them online. And what was wild about that to me is you're literally in the position that the lead singer is a lot of the time in the show. And because of the 360 technology, you want to look over at the bass player, that's up to you. You want to turn around and look at the drummer and see what he's doing, that's
Right.
cool too. And then but I don't know how to describe it. It was just the complete openness of the platform and of the experience that made me feel like I was there with those 5,000 people and in the middle of it. And that excited me. I see this as something that is going to be embraced in this industry quite heavily. So
Right. I think the biggest challenge has been, and maybe this has been the biggest challenge to some of the other technologies that we're only now seeing, is that for whatever reason the American public has been slow to adopt.
mm,
We have not we've seen headsets sell, but more on the gaming side rather than in the broad entertainment side. And yet I will tell you, I have a headset and I watch Netflix movies on there, and I have my own complete audio experience in a completely black room with a screen the size of however big I want to make it. And it's an incredible way to watch content. But yes, you're completely segregated from the world, and it's your space. But in a lot of cases, people are looking at their own phone. They're segregating themselves in
isn't
many
that
other
the
ways.
truth?
So
I get embarrassed by those weekly reports that comes up on my phone saying, this week you spent this many hours
yeah,
on your phone.
95
Yeah.
hours on the phone. But I sometimes change happens by necessity, and part of COVID means, we are facing the opportunity to embrace technologies maybe we've never embraced before, and we may like it.
Yeah. Some of the things I like, I'm already liking them. So,
That's right. Maybe one time we'll have to do a show with the 360 camera in the middle, and
ooh, I like that
we can
idea.
look back and forth between Ace and myself. And
And we'll make sure Ariel's in the studio. I had a lot of people ask about Ariel. Yes, it's Mark's dog. She's an absolute sweetheart, and so
yeah, she gets a little hyper in the beginning, so we hold off the beginning of the podcast, and then she settles down and she just kind of chills.
she's awesome.
So I do have a question. I don't know whether or not you've listened to music this week, but if you have, and of course you have,
Of course, I have.
what's your favorite of the week?
Well, one of the things that I end up having to do as part of my job is a lot of the times I have to listen to demos or mixes of material my artists are doing. But also, when one of my artists is coming up with a new record, I tend to really want to absorb it because ultimately my job is to go out there and sell it. So unless I really know it, I can't really do a good job of that. Now, so this week, one of my artists, Ricky Warwick, has got a new solo record coming out early next year, and we're now preparing to shoot a video for it and starting the marketing and all that sort of thing. So I've been listening to that album a great deal. Um, I also this week I've been on a real tear because the anniversary of the heavy metal movie inspired me to re-listen to that soundtrack a few times. I've also another one of my artists, Diamond Head, is coming out with a re-release of one of their more popular records, where they've re-recorded it all with their current vocalist, and there's some extra covers on there and stuff. And I have to say, it was blowing me away. So I was listening to that a lot. And I also had a conversation this week with a dear friend of mine who's a road guy up in Canada, and he works closely with Lawrence Gowan, who's the singer from Styx. His name's Ryan. And Ryan and I were talking, and we got into a conversation about April Wine a little bit, which is one of my favorite Canadian bands. If you haven't checked out April Wine, oh my, that's a catalog that you need to explore. But anyway, so I put me in the mood to start listening to some April Wine, and then on top, and then on the more odd side, um, my little nephew, who's 10 and big into music, he has been exploring a lot of Japanese music lately for some reason. So he keeps sending me YouTube links, and he's memorized the lyrics in Japanese and all this. So that's been part of it. But yeah, that's my week. How about you? What have you been listening to this week?
Well, I so first I end up listening to a lot of kids pop music because of my 11-year-old. Um, and at some point maybe we'll offer the names and see if you've ever heard of any of them.
Okay,
But they're
probably.
big stars, millions and millions and millions of downloads. It's unbelievable. It's like sometimes I feel like I'm on I've got a bit of an attitude, that my music is the best music, but the number of downloads for some of these pop bands is pretty astounding. Um, but my week, I will tell you, I had a bit of a throwback week, and I can't get enough of the Kinks this week. I was
Kinks.
I found myself putting on Celluloid Heroes,
Mm.
the album, and just somehow I got in the mood for that kind of a chill storytelling, the Ray Davies style at its best, and so
I don't know where it's at right now, but I did hear, and this is just going from memory, that about a year ago or something, the two brothers announced that they had kind of finally buried the hatchet and were talking about actually doing some shows. So,
but I'll tell you, knowing what I know of the two brothers, having witnessed fights on stage, I could tell you that they may bury the hatchet now, but uh, a couple of days later, they may have a hatchet back. And
yeah,
I
but
don't know. I can't speak to it in truth. I can only say, wow, I would do anything to go catch that show. I don't know if it'll happen, but I would do anything to
well,
see
I
it.
hope so. But um, actually, it's funny you mentioned the Kinks this week because another thing that I had been listening to quite a bit is one of my artists is planning to put out a album of covers, and so internally we've been doing back and forth about what do you think would be good songs for this band to cover, and my list included several Kinks tracks, including Destroyer and things like that, which I think this band would just kill. But yeah, the Kinks, that's a band that's been with part of my lexicon for many, many decades. So
That's right. And on the other side of covering the King songs, I almost can't stop hearing them today. Just this week, I heard the 10,000 Maniacs version of Better Days and the Dar Williams version of Better Days, and so the covers are out there and they're so good. The songs are so good that they do translate well when other people provide their own interpretations of them, which is fun.
yeah, I remember the Goo Goo Dolls put out an album about, I'm thinking it was 5 or 6 years ago, and if you bought the deluxe edition, it had a few extra tracks, and one of them was a Kinks cover, and I remember it was a Kinks song that I didn't know very well, and the title eludes me at the moment, but their interpretation of it brought that song to me. then I started listening to the Kinks version as well. But it's an excellent cover. It's an excellent one.
That's right. Well, this is the part of the podcast where we announce our sponsors. And this show is officially sponsored by Ace and Mark.
That's right. That's right.
One day that may change, but welcome Ace and Mark to the show, and
Indeed. But yeah, this definitely is something that we will be working on in the future. So.
And we are opening a Patreon account.
We are. Yeah. Patreon being a way for you guys to be a bigger part of the show, and we'll be providing some material that you won't hear on the free podcasts. But yeah, we'll let you know more about that in the very near future.
Well, that sounds good. Well, Ace, this has been awesome once again.
Indeed, fun.
So, in within the next week, what's the day we're offering this thing up?
Thursdays. We'll try Thursdays. So, and and remember, subscribe to it. Send us feedback on the email acetalksmusic@gmail.com. Send us your suggestions for things you want us to discuss or find more out about for you. And in the meantime, we'll see you next week.
Sounds good. We'll see you, Ace.
See ya.